This episode discusses themes of intimate partner violence. Please take care when listening. A young beauty, whisked away by a charming man. He picks her up in his chariot, showering her with extravagant gifts.
It was magical. I mean, it was sheer magic. He'd send his driver to my house with $15,000 in cash and a Bulgari watch and, just extreme over-the-top dinners and $2,000 bottles of wine and it was fun.
A modern-day fairy tale.
And yeah, we just fell mad passionately in love.
Remember, though, most fairy tales were never really meant to be aspirational, but rather to be cautionary. And this story, this very true story, has a wolf.
Jordan Belfort is my ex-husband, a.k.a. the Wolf of Wall Street.
Nadine Macaluso was once Nadine Belfort, married to a man who would go on to serve 22 months in prison for fraud and related crimes.
That was my freedom. Ironically, when he got his ankle bracelet, then I had my freedom because I knew he couldn't hurt me anymore. Right. And I felt safe. And it was so clear that he was the criminal and I was not. Because when you're dealing with someone that has a lot of money and power, I was always afraid to leave him because I didn't know how anything could get twisted. And you have to remember, again, this was 25 years ago, so it was even worse. So I was smart, I think, in that sense, to wait. I didn't know he was going to get an ankle bracelet and all that, but it was my ticket to ride.
They called her the Duchess of Bay Ridge, but behind the glitz and the glamour was love bombing and trauma bonding. Nadine didn't just live the abuse. She went on to study it and write about it in her book, Run Like Hell, and devote herself to helping other people navigate it. How she broke free, healed, and became Dr. Nay to her patients and a huge TikTok following. Today on the Gratitudeology podcast.
Will you walk through the fire? Would you ride through the storm? Will you walk on a wire? Will you save me if I fall? Will you break through the madness? Set us down where we're safe. I'll be right here waiting till you find me again.
My name is Jordan Belfort. The year I turned 26, I made $49 million, which really pissed me off because it was $3 shy of $1 million a week.
That's Leonardo DiCaprio in an Oscar-nominated performance in Martin Scorsese's highest-grossing film, 2013's The Wolf of Wall Street. These wild parties, drugs, piles of cash, guns, a chimpanzee, and that's just the trailer. But that's Jordan Belfort's story. This is Nadine Macaluso's story.
I was raised by a single mother in the 1970s in Bay Ridge.
Bay Ridge is a neighborhood in Brooklyn connected by the Verrazano Bridge to Staten Island. It's where John Travolta's character lives and spends his weekends tearing up the disco dance floor in Saturday Night Fever. And it's where Nadine Caridi spent her childhood.
And it was just a magical time. And I was raised by a mother that was very into psychology and was reading Jung and Freud, way before I even studied it. And so I grew up in a house where feelings were always discussed. And I was very blessed in that way. And I really just loved I had a charmed, magical childhood.
When she was around 17, she needed to start earning some income.
I went into the city to model because I did grow up with a single mother, and literally I just needed to make money. Mm-hmm. And everybody was telling me, you should be a model, you should be a model.
By the way, Barbie herself, Margot Robbie, played the character based on Nadine in Wolf of Wall Street. And looking at photos of Nadine from that time and what she still looks like sitting in front of me, let me tell you, the casting, it's spot on. So she was able to land modeling work pretty easily.
But my mother did not like that. My mother was very into education, right? So hence why I probably ended up getting my doctorate. But she did never wanted me to rely on the way I looked. And I fully respect that now. But back then I was like, no, but I need to make money. So then I went to the city. I lived in Brooklyn Heights with my best friend. And I just started to model in New York City. And it was, it's a boring, tough business, but it paid the bills. I mean, it was a fun time, too, because it was the supermodel era. So it was Cindy Crawford and Naomi Campbell and Linda Evangelista. So it was like a very magical time to be a model. Not that I was in their league at all, but it was a fun time in the city for that. The models were the only ones getting their makeup done, getting their hair done. It's not like today.
Right. Everyone's all dolled up now, but it was special.
It was special back then. And, again, it was a boring job. It wasn't fulfilling, but it helped me pay the bills. And, and then I did a lot of more commercials because I'm short. I'm 5'7" for a model. So I was with Elite Petite.
Right.
And so I was with like Denise Richards, Halle Berry. They were all with my agency.
With the gigs came the parties.
Back in the 80s and 90s, there were these guys called model mongers that were like obsessed with models. They only dated models. So my boyfriend at the time was one of them. And he took me to Jordan's party in the Hamptons.
So when you met him at this party in the Hamptons, he was married?
So he was married, yes. So I came with my boyfriend. He was married. He was having this party. And when I walked in, I was so young. God, I think I was 22 at the time. And everybody just seemed really strange to me. And I was like, what's happening here? I didn't know they were all on Quaaludes. Okay, because I never could have imagined that. And then a man did expose himself to me. And I felt so violated, so freaked out. And my boyfriend didn't see because I think he had his back to him. And I just said to my boyfriend, we got to get out of here. This just felt yucky. That's so cruel to do to a young girl.
Awful.
Yeah, it's not funny. And so we left.
But she had caught the host's eye.
And he, I guess, kind of became obsessed with me and was trying to contact me. But at that point, I was with my boyfriend and I was actually going to Chicago to model. So we didn't really connect, but I would always see him around the Hamptons.
Soon enough, they started dating. They quickly got married, had a baby girl when she was 25, then a son at 27. All while Jordan Belfort was skyrocketing to uber success as a stockbroker at Stratton Oakmont. Success is an understatement. Wealthy is an understatement. To sum it up, a casual purchase for him was a luxury yacht. One that was originally built for Coco Chanel.
He decided he wanted to buy a yacht because for Jordan, it's either he goes big or he goes home. And he said, I'm going to buy the yacht for you. I said, I don't want a yacht. We have 2 little babies that can't swim. I didn't need it, but he wanted it. And then, of course, he called it after me. So it was my gift, but really it was a gift for him. And it was beautiful and it was wonderful. But we had a very terrible experience where we were going from Rome to Sardinia and we got caught in a squall. And there were, these just crazy 40-foot waves that were crashing on the yacht for 12 hours. And I thought I was going to die. That was probably one of the top 5 scariest moments of my life. But luckily, the Italian Intrepid came and saved us and hoisted me 40 feet up into a helicopter.
Your kids weren't with you?
No, it was the first time I left my children.
Oh my God, that's terrifying.
It was terrifying. And I had done audio tapes of bedtime stories for them. And I was like, that's the last time my kids are going to hear my voice. But thank God it wasn't. And we lived to tell. But yeah, life with him was one crazy thing after the next. here I was, this young girl, so I didn't know what it was like to live in a 10,000 square foot house and have landscapers and have a housekeeper and have a limo driver, right? So what did I do? I learned about wine. I went to interior design school because I was like, if I'm going to spend this money, I want to know what to do with it. That's just the way my brain works. And no, it was wild. I mean, also, I didn't really want to be sequestered in the suburbs at 24, but he wanted me to be. It was a gilded cage.
It was a gilded cage. The yacht, it turns out, might as well have been a metaphor. What looked like a fantasy from the outside ended up ravaged by the storm.
Jordan is the most charming, most magnanimous man you will ever meet. I mean, he is the consummate salesman. When he is on, he is on. And he's incredibly bright, and he made me feel like I was the only person in the world. But then the mask, when it falls, is the selfishness, the lack of empathy, and the rage. And so his personality, I would say, is one of extremes. And when he works, he's like a grand symphony. And when he doesn't, he's like a natural disaster. His early therapist said those words to me.
Here you are starting the foundation of this life you think you're going to live that's a fairy tale.
Yes.
When did the cracks start to show?
You know, I think the cracks started to show very early on. I just wasn't aware they were cracks because of my naivete and my age. When we first met 6 months in, it was the threatening and the domination. If you're not going to marry me, I'm not going to date you. And I was like, okay, that's so strange. I don't want to get married. I didn't want to get married because my parents had been divorced. So I wanted to wait till I was 30. So that was done. If you're not going to have children with me, I won't marry you. So the goalpost kept moving. And so there were early signs that I didn't know. I was like, oh, he just loves me. That's why he's doing this. But, you know, plowing through my boundaries and not hearing my needs at all doesn't make for a great relationship. Right. So that was the foundation. So it started very early on.
Nadine now knows she was experiencing a trauma bond. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot, not always correctly. So I'm going to let her explain it. In this case, in the relationship between lovers. This is one of her TikToks.
One of the partners betrays, harms, abuses, or manipulates the other lover. And this actually causes great harm to their partner, but the partner stays loyal to them no matter what, because there is an emotional attachment between these two people. And so what makes it traumatic is that it's very wounding for the one partner that's getting abused, yet they feel totally trapped and bonded to that person and they can't get out, or they think they can. The thing about, when you're in a trauma bond, the person, Jordan especially, he could be so generous and helpful and kind. He really could be. I think when it suited him. But then on a dime, he could turn. And when he turned, or let's say I would confront him about his drug addiction, that's what we really fought about a lot, especially because here he was demanding I have children, then I have children, and he's stoned all the time.
His drug of choice? Quaaludes.
If I would confront him about it, he would get extraordinarily rageful and derogatory and insulting. So then I would really begin to fear him. And I slowly lost myself because I couldn't give voice to my truth. I was no match for him.
What did it feel like being inside that? Was it confusing? Did you have moments where you're like, I'm so grateful for this life, but also this is just awful?
Yes, exactly. And, grateful, but then that's the cognitive dissonance that keeps the woman in the bond.
Yes, because I can't give this up. Where would I be without him?
Yeah, and it's like, I'm grateful, but I hate it. He's good and he's bad. Am I crazy or is he crazy? Right? Is the relationship good or bad? And that's the cognitive dissonance that keeps a woman glued. Because of course I was grateful. Of course there were moments where it was wonderful, but I always say, and I work with my patients with this, when the pain of staying is worse than the pain of going, right, then you really have a problem. And I just wanted myself back.
This continued until Nadine was 31 years old.
I confronted him about his drug addiction. I said, I'm not going to sit here and watch you kill yourself. All your friends who, they just look at you as a money trainer watching you do this. And that's when he got very violent and threw my clothing and jewelry and lit them on fire. You're not leaving. Where do you think you're going? That whole thing. And then he said to me, I'm going to take our daughter, Chandler, to Florida on a private plane. Now, he's stoned out of his mind. And I'm like, no, you're not. And luckily, my mom had told me, before you go home, please tell them you're going home to a domestic violence situation. And I did. And so as he was trying to take my daughter and I confronted him, he kicked me in my solar plexus down the stairs. But I was strong. Ran up the stairs, dialed 911, hung up, chased him. I said to my housekeeper, close the garage door so they can't leave. We got her. She took her to the back, and then he got arrested.
Soon, he was back. Then came the feds.
So he got arrested on 11 counts of money laundering. And so that's what he finally got arrested for. And that was, a fun day when the FBI came to my house with the big FBI with the don't move. And that was the most, a very scary day in my life. My son had left his blanket at my friend's house. So I had driven to get his blanket. And when I came back, they were all in my driveway waiting for me. And so they brought me into the kitchen. And the hard part was that they arrested him, but nobody told me, if this happens, this is what you should do. This is who you should call. So I was left alone with them for 4 hours while they grilled me unprotected. I tell these things so bluntly, without emotion, but I just want your audience to know it's because it's 25 years later, and I've processed it ad nauseum in therapy. But trust me when I tell you, I was shaking. I was shaking in my boots. It was absolutely horrible. And then he did get arrested. Then once he had the ankle bracelet on, that's when I left him.
Nadine left with nothing. Everything they had was from a pump and dump fraud scheme, and she wanted no part of it.
We gave all of our homes. I gave back all of my jewelry. I could have asked for some of it back. I didn't want it. That meant nothing to me at this point. My freedom, my sense of self, my peace, my quality of life was all I wanted. So I was like, bye-bye. And it was all blood money. Mm-hmm. So why did I want money that had hurt people? Mm-hmm. Right? And I had my own company at the time. Yeah. I'd started a maternity company. So I was happy to get rid of it. I walked away with absolutely nothing. And I always joke, I had my kids and my curtains. And I was young. Mm-hmm. So I was hopeful still.
Nadine would turn that hope into a whole new career, helping herself and others along the way. Meanwhile, Jordan wrote a memoir, which was the basis for the movie.
It's one thing to live through a Greek tragedy and then have it become a movie for, the whole world to see was certainly something to contend with. I would not let them use my name for the movie. And I was like, no, I make no money. I have no creative control. It's not my narrative. So Martin Scorsese's office called me up and they said, hey, it's Martin Scorsese's office. I said, it's about time you fucking call me. You're making a movie about my life. Don't you want to talk to me a little bit? So I think they just wanted to see if I was going to sue them. And I wasn't going to because I had surrendered that this was bigger than me. And I needed to just release and let go. But then they did ask me to meet Margot. And I got to meet her. She was so sweet, 22 years old, babe in the woods. And they wanted my accent, this ridiculous accent, my Fran Drescher voice. And they got it.
Nadine credits therapy with her ability to navigate and process the movie. She was even going back to school to be a therapist at age 39 when the movie came out.
I went back to school and then I got my master's and got my doctorate. And I had a great private practice in my home in Manhattan Beach, California. And I just love my work. I feel blessed to do it every day. And I knew that therapy had saved my life through my marriage to Jordan. So I really want to go back and be of service to other people. Now, I never wanted a specialty. I was adamant about not having one, which is ironic. But then what happened is that all these beautiful, smart, kind, empathetic women kept coming into my practice being verbally abused, emotionally abused, financially abused, coercively controlled, manipulated, betrayed. And I just thought, we have a problem. What is happening here? You know, we're not in the 1950s anymore. We've had 4 waves of feminism. What's happening? And so, being a true academic, thanks, Mom, I went back to the research to really just understand trauma balance, dark tetrad, gaslighting, coercive control. And as I was doing that, I started my social media. I don't even know why I did, because this was in 2012.
So early.
It's so early, before people were really on Instagram.
Yeah.
But I just am a very open person. And I was like, let's do it. I think I got really, really serious about it in 2017 or 16. I think I posted every single day since that year. One of my young patients said to me, you have to go on TikTok. I said, I am 55. I am not videoing myself every day. She convinced me and I did it. And then I started to talk about my life with the wolf. And then that's what went crazy. So what's great is that I can use that as a vehicle to educate women about all the things that we talk about with trauma bonds and toxic relationships, and empower them. And I get so many messages, DMs from women all over the world saying, Nadine, I've left because of you. You've saved me so much. You've helped me so much. And that is the most just fulfilling, rewarding part of my work. So social media has a lot of great things.
Social media has its problems, but it can really connect us when we need it most. I'd like to play one of Nadine's TikToks where she's reading her journal from when she left Jordan.
But then I played it safe and got married. I played it safe, and look how dangerous it became. Now I must build my own road, decorate my own soul, and plant my own garden.
In recovery, I was taught that we keep what we have by giving it away. And I see that in Nadine and what she's grown for herself and her patients.
If I can use my education to help other people, what's better than that? And also, as you get older, there's something called generativity, meaning that what is your legacy? What are you leaving the world with? And the world is a really screwed up place, as we know today. And so if you and I can add just a little bit of kindness and decency and truth and empower people, why not? And so one of the reasons why I wrote my book especially was because in social media, we victimize the victim, right? Even when I left Jordan, they were like, you're codependent, he's an addict. No, he was a pathological selfish abuser, and I was a young girl that got taken advantage of. That didn't mean I didn't have my own things to look at, but abuse and betrayal is always the fault of the abuser or the betrayer, right? So in my book, I really destigmatize the victim, and that's why so many women love it. Because they're like, you see me.
I want to pause here to acknowledge how difficult it still is for people in these dangerous situations. Several states have loopholes around marital rape laws. In Virginia, for example, criminal charges can be avoided by agreeing to go to therapy. Meanwhile, in Missouri, women seeking divorce are required to disclose whether they are pregnant, and state judges won't finalize a divorce during pregnancy. Homicide, by the way, is the leading cause of death in pregnant women in the United States. Nadine is on a mission to educate and help people.
So there are two things. There are two conditions that have to occur for a trauma bond to exist. And the first one is a power imbalance. And usually the person that's the abuser has the power. And you can have power from having more resources. Somebody can have power over you just because you love them, right? Or they can gain power over you, like what happened with me, through domination and threats. So must be a power imbalance. The second thing is intermittent abuse or intermittent reinforcement, meaning the person is generous, kind, helpful, love bombing, amazing. But then let's say they're like that 30% of the time, but 60% of the time, they're cruel, controlling, abusive, disparaging, manipulative, gaslighting, betraying. And so it's those extreme experiences that actually create the bond. And so those two things have to be there for it to exist. And if you notice yourself feeling totally confused and in a fog and having cognitive dissonance, because initially the man presents or the woman presents in this loving, kind way, but then over time the mask starts to fall. So once they have you hooked in, then the real self starts to come out.
And as for Jordan?
You know, we really do have a good relationship when it comes to our kids.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really important.
How does he feel about looking back on his bad behavior? Does he regret it? Has he changed?
I'm not with him enough to know that he's changed. I'm sure he has regret. I've heard him talk about it. But, that's his story. The most important thing is that he has a great relationship with our kids. Right. And that, to me, is all that matters.
Nadine remarried and had a different kind of storied romance.
I met him about 1.5 years, 2 years after Jordan, and he had 3 kids. I had 2, and the Brady Bunch was my favorite show growing up. So I was so excited I got to have a modern-day Brady Bunch, and he lived in Los Angeles. So I was really happy to pick up my kids and move, because I didn't want them to deal in New York with this horrible legacy that they had nothing to do with. And so we really got a fresh start on life in Los Angeles. And he's a great husband. We've been together 25 years, I think, this June. Yes.
Hello.
And he's so supportive of everything that I'm doing now. And listen, I'm sure it's not fun for him to hear me talk about my ex-husband nonstop, right? But he knows I'm doing it for a bigger mission, and he's super supportive. That's love for you.
I always tell people that sitting in the fear of doing something is worse than just walking over the hot coals to the other side. And Nadine is helping people walk over those coals. Here's just one story.
Yes. So one of my patients, we were in therapy together. A lot of times I don't tell you initially because they're embarrassed, but the abuse was escalating, and I said to her, okay, this is what I want you to do. When he touches you or hits you or does anything threatening, text your friend a code word, and she's going to know to call the police, and we're going to get him arrested. And that all went great. And so I worked with her from the beginning. She got an amazing attorney, and she was able to keep her kids from her abuser. She was able to get the money she deserved. She's going back to school to get her master's in business. Now listen, 2 to 3 years, I was in it with her. It was hard, but she documented well. She had good self-care, and she's out of it, and she's back in school. She's in her 40s. She has 2 young boys, and she's thriving.
Nadine Macaluso, thank you for your openness, your resiliency, and for finding yourself again so that you can help other people do the same. You can find Dr. Nadine on Instagram and TikTok at @TheRealDrNadine. The book is Run Like Hell. And if you or anyone you know is in need of help, please see the resources listed in the show notes below. That's all for today. Remember, if you like what you heard, if it impacted you in any way, and if you think it's a message other people in your life might like to hear, I'd be so grateful if you'd give me 5 stars, leave a quick little comment. Those things really help. And share this podcast with your friends, either on social media or just word of mouth. I'm on a mission for us all to help each other focus on expanding our attention towards what's good in the world rather than focusing on what's bad, one person at a time. If we all did that, even to our own little sphere of influence, the world has the potential to be a much more radically awesome place. Stick with me, friends. I've got your back. We're in this together, and it's a great day to see the greatness in the day. See you next time. The Gratitudology podcast is written, executive produced, and hosted by me, Jamie Hess. Sound design and studio production by Gotham Production Studios. Our theme song is Maze by Hills, sung by Nadia Ali. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Gratitudology.